नमस्कार एस्पिरेंट्स, आप सभी का मेंस 2024 क्रैश कोर्स में स्वागत है। सेशन शुरू करने से पहले आइए समझते हैं कि ये प्रोग्राम क्या है और आप इसका अधिक लाभ कैसे उठा सकते हैं। द स्टडी बाय मणिकांत सिंह आपके लिए लाए हैं मेंस 2024 RWR प्रोग्राम यानी रीड राइट रिवाइज। ये प्रोग्राम आपकी मेंस प्रिपरेशन में एक पैराडाइम शिफ्ट लाने वाला है। इस प्रोग्राम के थ्रू हम आपको 200 प्लस सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट टॉपिक्स प्रोवाइड करेंगे जो मेंस 2024 के लिए क्रूशियल हैं। इन टॉपिक्स पर बेस्ड क्वालिटी क्वेश्चन पेपर्स बनाए गए हैं जो आपको सप्ताह में 2 बार यानी मंगलवार और शनिवार को टेलीग्राम चैनल पर शाम 8 बजे अपलोड किए जाएंगे। आपको इन क्वेश्चंस को अटेम्प्ट करना है और अपनी प्रिपरेशन को टेस्ट करना है। अगले दिन उनका रिगरस डिस्कशन और मॉडल कंटेंट यानी बुधवार और रविवार को शाम 8 बजे यूट्यूब चैनल पर लाइव होगा। मेंस क्रैश कोर्स के डिस्कशन के थ्रू GS 1, 2, 3 और 4 सभी 200 प्लस मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट टॉपिक्स का एब्सोल्यूट कवरेज होगा। आप अपने दोस्तों के साथ इस प्रोग्राम का उपयुक्त लाभ उठाएं। कमेंट बॉक्स में दिए गए टेलीग्राम चैनल पर क्लिक करें, चैनल को सब्सक्राइब करें और अपनी मेंस 2024 की प्रिपरेशन को आसान बनाएं। धन्यवाद।
Hello dear students, this is Dr. Saurabh Jain at Study IAS. This particular series of videos is regarding RWR program of Study IAS, which is Read, Write and Revise, where we try to add in value into your mains preparation. Of course, this is part of our super advanced foundation program as well. In RWR, you can read one of the important topic specifically in the contemporary issues. You can write about that particular topic and revise through this particular method also. I'll be dealing with environment, biodiversity and science tech related topics as well. Right, in today's discussion, we can look up to one of the important priority issue in this year's main, which is climate smart agriculture. Climate smart agriculture or climate resilient agriculture has been there in the contemporary issues, constantly has been discussed with various things coming into place, be it climate resilient agriculture, or be it adaptive agriculture, or be it we speak about the zero budget natural farming, or we speak about organic farming, or we speak about stuffs related to carbon farming and regenerative agriculture. All of these, they are constantly there, and somewhere down the track they all link up to one particular thing, which is adaptive or sustainable agriculture. And climate smart agriculture becomes the holistic term relative to such type of the things which are being asked, or such type of the things which we can look up to also. Now, if we look up to climate smart agriculture, this is something which is being created as adjustable agriculture or adaptive agriculture technique when climate change is bound to happen, or if the climate change is bound to happen, the foremost problem with the climate change would be with agriculture, and India, a country which is highly dependent on agriculture, would be affected at most because of changing nature of the climate. And in that condition, if we need to create certain adjustments, certain adaptations, certain mitigations over here to fight back with the climate change and to maintain our agricultural productivity, we require climate resilient agriculture or climate smart agriculture. Climate resilient agriculture or climate smart agriculture are quite new in understanding, or we can say these all have developed in 2009 and 2010 only, with United Nations Framework Convention for Climate Change discussing about adaptations towards climate change, or under the Kyoto Protocol also, when we understand that if we require certain aspects of development, or if we require certain aspects of sustainable development, then adaptations are the foremost important aspects. And in that being, adaptations of different ecosystems as well as adaptation of agricultural ecosystem has been spoken of at large. So climate smart agriculture has came out over here as a term of discussion for the global leaders also, and with the Indian platform also, to create adaptive conditions towards agriculture in the state of climate change. And of course, countries like India, they are at large impacted by climate change. If we say climate change and climate change related factors, or global warming and global warming related factors, they are bound to happen. Yes, they are happening in India, and we can see multiple problems coming out of this climate change or the impact of climate change. If we speak about the impacts also, then the northern plains, they are facing the impacts of flooding, glacial meltdown, extreme heat wave. Highest temperature have been recorded amongst the decades in the last 2 or 3 years also. The conditions conducive for agriculture or various different ecosystems, they have become tougher. In the coastal areas or even in the peninsular areas, submergence of the land, the storm-like condition or disturbance of the monsoon or overall disturbance of the monsoon in the Indian mainland is something which has been seen because of the climate change and as an impact of climate change itself. And when we speak about various other impacts or the cumulative impacts, then different ecosystems, they have different impacts, and of course the agricultural ecosystems, they are also not being left apart from these impacts which are being taken into consideration. So if we understand this particular thing, the agriculture right now in India is facing a triple burden. Triple burden in a sense that, of course, it is facing a burden of climate change, and with climate change appearing into or cultivable conditions becoming difficult, then the impacts on agricultural productivity which would be much more higher. IPCC has predicted in 2014 and later in 2019 also that in countries like India, which are facing, or the tropical countries like India, if the climate change is bound to happen, or rather it is happening, then the productivity of the food grains in countries like India would decrease by 10 to 16% in the first 2 decades itself. That means by 2040, or even much more earlier, the agricultural productivity may decrease, and this may decrease because of various other factors also. The resources may degrade, soil resource may degrade, water resources may degrade, we would require more amount of water with increasing heat also. Then of course we will require more amount of the fertilizers and pesticides because the pest infestation would also be higher in agriculture, and with that the dependence on synthetic sources would be much more higher, and then that would increase the overall load of chemical fertilizers and synthesizers in the agricultural field, and that would also impact the overall agricultural productivity. So first and foremost problem right now with the agriculture is that climate change and productivity tangle would be something which would be quite enormously dangerous for India. The second burden that agriculture is facing right now is agriculture is amongst one of the highest GHG emitting sectors in India, apart from, we can say, energy and coal bound phenomena, or even we can say fossil fuel based phenomena. If we speak about agriculture, then various aspects of agriculture or various different parts of agriculture, they are one of the largest emitters of greenhouse gases, which is the second burden of agriculture right now. Agriculture is getting impacted by climate change, and climate change is happening because of the greenhouse gases, and agriculture itself is one of the largest producer of the greenhouse gases itself. That becomes one of the major problem also. And if we look up to the amount of emissions which come up from the paddy cultivation between 2010 and 2019, in a decade, India has been the second highest emitter of greenhouse gases from the paddy cultivation, which is again one of the major crop in India, food crop in India. In fact, this itself indicates that the amount of pollution from agriculture or the traditional agriculture from India is much more higher. The different sectors of agriculture, that may be enteric fermentation or rice cultivation or fertilizer supplied, or we can say manure management, or we can say burning up of the waste from the agricultural products, this all is adding into the emissions which are being created. And because of this, the global warming or the warming of the localized sector is far more higher, and the microclimatic alterations have started to appear as well. Now, if this climate change and emission related phenomena is, even if we understand, the first burden is because of the greenhouse gas, the first burden is because of climate change, the second burden is because of greenhouse gases, the overall problem, or the third and the most important burden, is adaptability with the agriculture. Agriculture needs to adapt to these two different burdens. That is, number one, it has to fight back against climate change. Number second, it has to reduce its emission itself. And as and when, if we understand, the overall impact of climate change would be far more higher. Not only with agriculture, we can see the impact of climate change. We can see the impact of climate change associated with agriculture and the socio-economic conditions in India also. If we understand, then IPCC has itself predicted that the global warming will have a large scale problem with Indian agriculture, where loss of biodiversity in the fragile environmental conditions or the ecosystem conditions would be far more difficult. The growing season of the crops would be far more higher. The insect and pest related diseases would be far more higher. Livestock would also be affected because of it. The frequency of weather extremes, that may be storms, drought, floods, etc., they would all alter, and in fact the frequency of these would be far more higher. That would create cultivable conditions far more difficult. And of course, when we speak about the coastal areas also, the fertile coastal areas, they would be lost. The marine agricultural produce that can come in, or the marine produces that can come in, that can help in food security, that can also be much more lower. With fishes and marine systems, they getting impacted over here. With all this, if we speak about, then climate change is bound to have an impact on agriculture, where severe yield reproduction in the crops would be
overall would be far more lesser. Disease and pest infestation would be far more higher. The scorching heat will have an impact over the biodiversity, and in fact the flowering up of the crops would be far more delayed, or it would be earlier also. Mortality of the fish population, poor milk production in the kettles, reduced vegetable quality, reduced quality of the eggs, meat, etc., and tracking symptoms in the tree fruits. They would all be certain factors that would not only be for the food crops, but all the related aspects of agriculture, they would suffer. And so much as such that IPCC in 2015 itself has predicted, out of various different contexts, that with climate change and in the next 20 to 30 years, that is by second or third decade of climate change or global warming that we see right now, that is up to by 2030 and post 2030 also, the productivity of the major crops in the country would be far more lesser. If you look up to rice, wheat, maize, sorghum, freshwater fishes, mustard, these all would be directly impacted by increasing heat content in the climate change, and the agricultural condition would be far more difficult. With rise in temperature itself, the flowering up of the plants would be far more earlier. The maturity of the grains would be far more accelerated also, and then that would create lower quality of the grains also and lower quantity of the grains also. That would directly hamper the overall productivity from agriculture. Extreme events like floods or such conditions, or even storms, they would lead towards soil erosion or loss of arable land also. Crop failure and damage is bound to happen with climate change, and submergence of fertile land is bound to happen with climate change and the extreme phenomena associated with climate change. The cumulative impact can also be seen in changing cropping pattern, decline in the overall yield of the agricultural produce, and the reduced quality of the grains would also be something that would be hampering for the agriculture in the upcoming decades as well. Also, the weed infestation, increased use of chemicals, soil and water pollution is bound to happen as a resultant of the conventional agricultural practices and the type of mechanisms that we are trying to create to fight back with climate change in the conventional agricultural practices. This all is bound to happen. With all these things, if we look up to, livestock sector would also be directly impacted, where there would be loss of productivity, the overall mortality and morbidity rate of the kettles, or even we can say the poultries, or even other things in livestock management would be far more higher. The biodiversity loss would be far more higher, and with all these things, the overall nutrient loss from the agriculture would be far more higher. The grains would be of lower quality, of lower nutrients also, of lower productivity also. Overall, it would not only be the qualitative decrease in the agricultural produce, rather it would be quantitative decrease as well that can be seen with the agricultural food products. And with all these things happening, the overall yield reduction may happen, and the overall income of the farmers would be far more lesser. And now, since the food produce would be far more comparatively lesser, and the population is constantly rising in India, the food inflation is bound to happen. When the food inflation is bound to happen, the overall purchase capacity of the people in country would be far more lesser. And then, since purchase capacity for the grains would be far more lesser, either two things can happen. Either hunger conditions may prevail in India, or the overburden of subsidies may also prevail in India. That would also be a governmental problem. Apart from this, since food grains would be less available, malnutrition may be bound to happen with population. And then, since the agricultural conditions would become far more difficult in the rural areas, the rural employment and livelihood conditions would also be difficult. And then, because the conditions are far more difficult in rural areas, the urban migration of the rural population would be far more higher. Now, this again would not only be the rural migration, this could also become the climate migration. And otherwise, the urban areas would be suffering from the settlement problems relative to climate change and the adjustment and adaptation relative to climate change, and there would be an influx of population from the rural area in the urban area. The adjustment problems would again be far more higher. So the overall disturbance in the economy with the agriculture itself, the overall disturbance in various major sectors of economy is bound to happen with this climate change and lesser adaptability of agriculture towards climate change. So overall productivity would be far more lesser, and food insecurity is bound to happen with climate change with the agriculture. And if all these things they are happening, the adaptability towards climate change is something which is required. Of course, India is working towards a large scale
upliftment towards adaptability for climate change. We are developing a huge green energy system over here, but adaptability in all different other sectors is also required, because it is not only about the greenhouse gas emission reduction, it is also increasing the overall adaptability towards climate change, adjusting population and adjusting economy and adjusting methods and adjusting the overall livelihood towards climate change is something which has to take place. And if the livelihood has to adjust towards climate change, and of course the initiation for this livelihood adjustment can only come in when the climate resilient agriculture or climate smart agriculture is being brought in. So if we understand in response to climate change, we require a large scale phenomena that can come in with climate resilient practices only. The climate resilient practices speaks about various different things. For the resilience towards climate, or for the overall adaptability towards climate, we require the resilience of agriculture. We require the reduction of greenhouse gases. We also require an increase in the forest cover. And then we also need to look up to the land use change reduction as well. And the overall water management is required that can help us in creating the overall climate resilient practices. When we understand all these things, the root of all these things can come in from climate smart agriculture, where adapting to climate smart agriculture can help in creating various other things where the overall adaptability of the agriculture can happen. Now see, over here, food security can come in from climate adaptive agriculture or climate smart agriculture. The income can raise, or the income at least can remain constant for the farmers with the climate smart agriculture. Production can increase with climate smart agriculture. The clean energy adaptation would be faster with climate smart agriculture. Then the agroforestry and social forestry can be brought in, where livelihood management can also happen, and reduction in greenhouse gases as well as forest cover increase can happen. Maintenance of the land area with organic farming etc. coming into climate smart agriculture can help in over here, and adapting to various practices of sustainable development can help in over here. Then again, storage capacity of water, supply and distribution, river health and other alternative sources of treatment for water can all appear if we opt on to one aspect of it, which is climate resilient agriculture or climate smart agriculture. So climate smart agriculture remains at the core of various different phenomena that can generate the basic adjustment or adaptation towards the climate change. And with basic understanding of climate smart agriculture, we can simply say climate smart agriculture is a mechanism which help us to create adaptations and mitigations into farming, improving resilience and reducing the overall emissions created by agriculture. This is one aspect of climate smart agriculture, and it is just an adjustment in the transform and reorient the agricultural systems to effectively support sustainable development. This itself is one particular phenomenon. So climate smart agriculture is nothing but just an overall transformation of the traditional agricultural practices, reduce the ill practices in agriculture, increase those practices which can be more sustainable and can be more suitable towards land, towards soil, towards water, towards planet, towards human health, and can be more responsive towards the changing nature of the climate. That itself is climate smart agriculture. The three basic principles of climate smart agriculture speaks about increasing the overall sustainability on the planet by increasing the productivity and income of the population. The second aspect of climate smart agriculture is strengthening the resilience towards climate change and the overall variability that can appear because of climate change. And the third and the foremost aspect of climate smart agriculture is reducing the agriculture's contribution to climate change. So overall, when we understand, climate smart agriculture helps in three different ways and three different means, and that is how it can also help in reducing the overall pressures which are being created over agriculture right now. So if we simply understand climate smart agriculture, then climate smart agriculture is helpful in three different ways. If we say climate smart agriculture, then climate smart agriculture number one is helpful in resource management. When we say resource management over here, the basic resources associated with agriculture can be soil, water, air,
energy and the grains, or we can say the seeds. The basic management of these resources can be driven in from the climate smart agriculture itself. And then the climate smart agriculture also helps in resource utilization. When we say resource utilization, increasing the utilization of those resources which are more sustainable or are locally available, or can be those resources which can have lower cost and higher benefit to the agriculture. Reducing the impact of harmful resources, or we can say synthetic fertilizers, etc., and then increasing the use of those type of resources which are more beneficial and more sustainable for the agricultural conditions. They can be all local resources, they can be all in-farm resources, or they can also be organic resources, so that we can reduce the overall impact of chemical fertilizers. This itself can help in reducing chemicals and increasing the overall resource value that can be created from climate smart agriculture. And the third and foremost aspect of climate smart agriculture can be with the emission reduction, where the overall impact of agriculture or the sustainability of the agriculture can be brought into in a particular way, that the overall emissions coming from climate smart agriculture, either they can be neutral or they can be negative, right? So if we understand in a simple term climate smart agriculture and three basic principles, the climate smart agriculture and three basic principles: resource management is something where sustainability can increase. Resource utilization is something where we can create resilience. And emission reduction through different practices of green energy or various different practices which are being taken up in agriculture that we will discuss also. They can be something where the practices of climate smart agriculture can help in bringing all these different phenomena all together. So resource utilization, management and reducing the emission is basic idea associated with climate smart agriculture, and all different practices which can be taken up in agriculture for realizing all these different factors, they can be climate smart agriculture parties only. So even if we speak about climate smart agriculture is a holistic thing. It is a holistic phenomena which can include in various different other non-traditional cropping patterns or non-conventional cropping patterns, be it be organic farming, zero budget natural farming, carbon farming, or we can say no tillage agriculture or variable rate fertilizer. All of these different agricultural non-conventional phenomena, they can be brought in at one aspect where sustainability and resilience can increase, and overall climate smartness can be developed or climate resilience can be developed. That is what is meant by climate smart agriculture itself. So when we understand climate smart agriculture has been defined as something which can create adaptation and mitigation towards climate change. Now IPCC itself has developed the basic idea of what is adaptation and what is mitigation. When we understand adaptation as a phenomena, then of course with agriculture coming into place, or with the conventional agriculture if we speak about, then conventional agriculture, we have spoken about that it is creating a lot of greenhouse gas concentration, and of course there are other more factors which are causing into the greenhouse gas emission. Because of this greenhouse gas concentration, there is a climate change, and because of this there are multiple impacts. That's what we have discussed about. These impacts, or in response to these impacts, we must generate certain things. And what is that? Number one, we must generate certain climate adaptations. What is meant by climate adaptation over here? Climate adaptation is meant by one particular aspect where we should take up certain steps, or we should generate certain phenomena that the impact of climate change can be minimized. This is one aspect. The second aspect of responses to climate change can be mitigation, where we try to cut down the greenhouse gases. So this itself, these two different phenomena or these two different explanation itself defines what is climate smart agriculture. When we say climate smart agriculture, so climate smart agriculture is going towards adaptation and mitigation.
How it is going through adaptation and mitigation? It is going through adaptation and mitigation through resource utilization and resource management. How it is going through mitigation? It is going through mitigation by reducing the overall emission of the greenhouse gases coming from agriculture. So climate smart agriculture, the basic phenomena is just this only: management of resources, conservation of the resources, and then utilization of the resources in farm and out farm, and very sustainable utilization of the resources, and then reducing the overall emission of the greenhouse gases is something which is called as climate smart agriculture. So if we look up to the basic adaptations that can be developed in agriculture through climate smart agriculture, the basic adaptation and mitigations, if we understand, the first and foremost aspect would be mitigation, how we can reduce the overall greenhouse gases coming from agriculture. We can go in for cropland management over here. With overall cropland management, we can say we can improve the overall agronomic processes. Agronomic processes, we would mean all the processes associated before cultivation and after cultivation. They are all the agronomic, agro and economic processes which are associated. It is not only agriculture, it is also the economics of agriculture which is to be taken up. Now, if we look up to a cultivable land itself, or if we look up to a crop itself, then before sowing into the seeds, there are multiple practices which are being taken up. We speak about tillage, or we speak about furrowing also. Whereas tillage over here is something where we dig down into the soil and we simply turn around the soil. Now this disturbs the microflora of the soil also, exposes much amount of the methane which is being trapped in the soil because of the anaerobic degradation of the organic matter, exposes that greenhouse gas also, increases emission also, disturbs the soil also, and disturbs the soil nutrient also. So even if before cultivation, if we are not going for tillage, we are practicing no tillage agriculture, then itself it is maintaining the agriculture as well as the economics of agriculture, because otherwise we will not spend that amount of the cost in tillage if we are going for zero tillage agriculture itself. So if we understand agriculture itself, it is not only the crop. Before the crop, preparation of the land, sowing up of the seeds, then raising the crop, harvesting the crop, then post-harvest storage of the crop, then selling it into the market. All these different practices, they are associated as the agronomic processes associated with cropland, or we can say crops. So we have to go in for sustainable agronomic processes where we have to reduce the overall emissions from these processes, and we have to create certain phenomena that these agronomic processes, they remain more climate neutral, or they remain more carbon neutral. That is one aspect. Second aspect is management of the nutrient, management of the soil nutrient. We must manage the soil nutrient in such a way that the in-farm resources can be utilized, or more organic resources can be utilized over here. Dependence on chemical resources can be reduced. Water management, overall management of the water resources and the water available on the cropland, and the water utilized with the crop also, and water stored with the soil also, all of it has to be taken into consideration. Tillage management, that is meant by the management of the soil. Then restoration of the degraded land so that they can be reconverted into crops, or different types of the crops, so that the carbon sequestration from that land can itself increase. Because if we will raise some type of the crop in a degraded land itself, that would rather reduce the carbon from the atmosphere rather than adding the carbon into the atmosphere. So erosion control and organic amendments can be added into these wastelands, and then they can be brought again into harvesting. Then livestock management, management of the livestock in such a way that the overall emissions can be lesser in their management, improving their feeding practices. Specific agents and dietary additives can be added into raising the livestock itself, so that the synthetic impacts can be lesser over the livestock, and more organic impacts can be brought in over here. Manure management, where anaerobic digestion should be managed, should be covered, because that would also be methane release itself over here. More efficient use of nutrient sources is also required over here with this, right? So climate mitigation, there could be multiple practices where we can take up in agricultural phenomena, where we can help in reducing the overall greenhouse gases also. The second aspect of it would be climate adaptation. How we can be more well suited towards climate change is something which can be taken up in climate adaptation. With climate adaptation, we can take up various things where we can develop certain seeds or cultivars which are more tolerant to heat, salinity stresses, resistant to flood and drought conditions, because they are bound to happen. We cannot reduce climate change right now. Climate change is bound to happen. All we can reduce is the impact or the effect of the impacts which are being created. So with more tolerant seed varieties, with more
drought tolerant, flood tolerant seed varieties or more tolerant varieties, we can be in a particular condition that at least in a change condition or in a variable condition also our agricultural productivity would be much more higher. We should modify the crop management practices. All those crop management practices which are agronomic processes also, we should modify these practices, and they should be less emission prone also, and they should be more suitable and sustainable against the variabilities in the climate conditions also. Improving the water management, that will also be something which we have taken up with the climate mitigation. Management of the water resources, over there in mitigation we need to reduce the overall consumption. Over here in adaptation we should be generating more and more resources in the water phenomena, or storing more amount of the water or harvesting more amount of the water would be something which can be taken up in climate adaptation. And then adopting on to the new farm techniques such as resource conservation technologies, RCTs, etc., that can help in generating more new technologies in agricultural fields, that may be from precision irrigation or precision agriculture, where ICT tools can be brought into the farmland, and with their help the practices in the agriculture can be much more smoothened, right? And then crop diversification, crop rotation, intermixing, mixed cropping, so that diversification of the crop also diversifies the type of nutrients which are being absorbed with the soil or taken up with the soil also, and then variety of the crops can be brought in over here with those nutrients, so that additional emphasis over chemical fertilizers can be lesser over here. With diversification we can bring in more different types of the crops that can either utilize or enrich soil with different types of the nutrients. So accumulation of one type of the nutrient or depletion of one type of the nutrient would be far more lesser in the soil with diversification, and that will create a phenomena where, depending on the resources available on the farmland itself, we could be able to generate more and more different types of the crops, and better economic value of the crop can be created over here. So that would be crop diversification, that can help in over here in adaptation, that can help in three things: resource utilization, and then generating more output out of the agriculture as well. Improving the pest management, so that we must generate certain phenomena which are less chemical dependent and more sustainable, so that the impact of these pesticides or chemical insecticides on the agricultural cropland can be reduced and agriculture can be more sustainable, right? Better weather forecasting, because we need to understand the changing nature of the climate, and the impact has to be presumed that if the flood has to appear in a particular area, there must be early warning system, so that agricultural adjustment can be created. Or even if there are low monsoon condition, then also there could be a prediction, so that adjustments can be created into that condition. If, say for example, in a particular area there would be low monsoon for next 2 years, rather than sowing rice in that particular area, sowing millets in that particular area would be far more beneficial for the farmers. They would not be only dependent on rice, they can also be dependent on millets, and that can also generate values out of agriculture itself. So market driven conditions and also the weather forecasting based condition itself can, or diversification of the agriculture itself can be something where we would be more adaptive towards climate condition. Crop insurance, understanding the nature of disasters of the climate related phenomena in agriculture and then ensuring those disasters for the farmer is also something important, and harnessing the indigenous technical knowledge of the farmers, because to a particular area, to a particular suited condition, farmers do have their own experiences also. Understanding those experiences, evaluating those experiences, and then applying it into certain other area where similar conditions are now prevailing after the climate change, that can also be something which can also be helpful. That would again be resource utilization, right? So resource management and resource utilization is something which is desired right now in the agriculture, and that is being given through climate smart agriculture. That's why climate smart agriculture is so important. So with climate smart agriculture we can generate various phenomena which can help in adaptation, mitigation, and the overall food production increase, where practices that will benefit the food production, adaptation and mitigation, like restoration of degraded land, improvement of macro and micro nutrients in the soil, can be something which can be taken up as an example. For adaptation, diversification of the crops, livestock, fisheries, improved on-farm and on-farm storage, etc. For mitigation, reforestation, decreased livestock production, agroforestry options that may have low food benefits also, that can also be taken up. And for food production, expanding the agricultural land, bringing in the degraded land back, reducing the land use change, increased use of mechanization, fertilizers and other input can be taken up over here, so that these all practices can help in number one, mitigation, that is carbon sequestration,
adaptation, adaptability towards climate change, and overall increase in the food production can be taken up with the climate smart agriculture. So with climate smart agriculture on a whole, with a large scale gist of the things that can come in over here, all we require are 8 different steps, rather 7 different steps in the policy making. The first and foremost would be management of the land. Land management over here would mean managing the soil resources and the overall variability of the land, nutrients, the availability of the organic material in the soil, maintenance of the soil microflora, aeration of the soil, maintaining water in the soil. This would benefit the overall agriculture itself. With changing climatic condition, these all different phenomena, they are bound to get disturbed, and with climate smart agriculture we can reduce those disturbances also. So for land management, soil health cards that can help in understanding the overall health of the soil, nutrient available with the soil quality based crop cultivation. What is the quality of the soil? Cultivation must be according to that quality of the soil itself. Organic farming and sediment tripping. Organic farming will help in adding more organic substrates over here and reducing the overall chemical load over the soil. So the salination and the degradation of the soil porosity or overall degradation of the soil resources would be far more lesser. And sediment tripping will help in retouring the sediments in the crops land itself, letting the nutrients absorb with the soil itself rather than getting tripped away into the aquifers or in the underground water resources. So that could be one aspect where climate smart agriculture can be realized, land management. The second aspect would be crop management, managing different types of the crops or managing the overall crops. Over here, the practices that can be involved, that can be crop rotation, bringing in 2 different crops in 2 different seasons, intercropping, bringing in 2 different crops in the same cropland in the same time in 2 different areas. Mixed cropping over here, mixed cropping can come in, or strip cropping can come in, where 2 different strips of the crop can be planted over here, or there could be a crop and a cover crop also coming in over here, right? Shifting planting, different area, different types of the crops, they must be taken at different seasons or in different years also, so that the nutrient management can be higher. Stress tolerant crops, tolerant to salt, tolerant to heat, tolerant to water, such type of the crops must be used. Short season crops, so that if there is a variability in the season condition, the winters can be slimmer with climate change, or the monsoon can be disturbed, so we can have at least a better response against these different phenomena which are bound to happen with climate change. Water management, sustainable management of the irrigation methods, drip irrigation, sprinklers, etc. can be brought in over here, so that water loss through irrigation can be far more lesser. Apart from this, we need to desalinate the soil so that the water absorption with the soil is far more higher. We need to increase the water reuse rather than wasting the water, or in fact losing the water. We must conserve water, we must store the waste water, treat it and bring it back into the farmland, so that water reuse can be brought in over here. Rainwater harvesting as well, harvesting the water so that the rain-fed agriculture efficiency can be far more higher as well. That can also happen with water management. Then livelihood management is also something which is desired. Livelihood management would mean that the overall income coming from agriculture, or the overall benefits that can be gained in agriculture through different modes, that must be created, or creating variable modes of income through agriculture. If say farmland is getting disturbed because of climate change, on the farmland with the crop, if certain other alternative methods are also being created, then the livelihood management of the farmers can be far more higher. So if we say with the crop we have livestock, with the crop we have plants, with the crop we have trees, then the overall variability of the income sources from the agricultural farmland would be far more higher, and that would sustain the livelihood of the farmer also. So livelihood management would mean having agroforestry, etc. Then integrated farming, where crops plus livestock systems can be brought in over here, crop production and livestock, multi-layered trees with crops, forestry, where fisheries, forestries, agriculture, all can be brought in on the farmland, and so the number of resources which can add in value into the agricultural produce can be far more higher. So the livelihood management would be far more higher. Then we can also practice one more aspect, which is conservation agriculture. Conservation agriculture is something which helps in maintaining the overall agricultural resources by 3 basic principles. Number 1, by keeping the soil covered. so that the overall moisture loss is less, keeping the soil in a state where it was earlier to the cropland, that means zero tillage. And number third, management of soil and water nutrient resources. So these are three major things through which the conservation agriculture is being practiced. So conservation agriculture can be where conservation of the natural resources of the farmland should be taken up, use of sustainable agronomic processes, again agronomic process over here, the inputs and outputs, the inputs of agriculture, the economic inputs of agriculture and the economic outputs of agriculture, they must be more conservative towards agriculture so that the resources are more conserved rather than more disturbed and depleted, right? Lesser use of the chemical fertilizers, reduced tillage, this all can be practiced with conservation agriculture, which can also be one aspect of it. Then genome based approaches can be taken up in climate smart agriculture, where genome based crop breeding, genetically modified resistant agricultural crops, genome editing for climate resilience can be brought in over here so that more tolerant crops can be created or more variability, genetic variabilities can be created with the crops or with the seeds itself, so that resistant varieties of the crop can be created, and then the output would rather be more than the problems which are associated in agriculture. So with that itself, the agricultural genome based approaches can also be brought in over here. Also in climate smart agriculture, plant adaptive strategies must be adopted so that the adaptation of the plants can be far more higher towards changing climatic condition, where physiological changes can be brought in into the plants to suit up to the climate change. The biochemical changes can be brought in over here, or morphological and molecular changes can be brought in with the plant so that they can be more suitable towards the changing nature of the climate. So in climate smart agriculture, the desirability or the mechanisms or the methods, they can be more resource management and utilization based. Apart from this, in climate smart agriculture, institutional mechanisms are also desired, which can help in developing and implementing the overall policy towards adapting strategies. And then technological innovations and social innovations must be brought in over here with climate smart agriculture, so that adaptability towards more adjusting and adaptive agriculture methods can be far more higher, right? So when we understand this particular thing itself, how do we realize climate smart agriculture in India, or we can say in farming practices? The climate smart agriculture can be realized with various different types of the phenomena or practices in agriculture. The first one can be zero tillage, where we reduce the overall tillage of the farmland or the overall tillage of the cropland itself. It can be conservational tillage, or it can be zero tillage. In conservational tillage, 30 to 40% of the cropland residue itself is left over there with the cropland itself, and it is being left over there, and the crops are being seeded with borers over there, so that the next variety of the crop is also grown, and the tillage is also not been done, that is plowing up of the cropland is also not been done. That would not release the methane, in fact, and that will help in adding more organic matter into the crop soil itself. So zero tillage can be practiced. Then mulching, covering up of the soil with either organic or vegetative resources, or even the plastic based resources, so that the moisture loss can be reduced with the soil. Creating cover crops, various different crops, types of the crops. They may be legumes, non-leguminous crops, which are short crops which can be grown all around the year over the cropland along with the crop itself. That helps to cover the soil, reduces the moisture loss, and also adds on to the organic value of the soil also, and increases the overall carbon sequestration from the soil, right? And also cover crops helps in management of the nutrient, nitrogen, etc. Then variable rate fertilizer system can also be something which can help in realizing climate smart agriculture, where we can apply a variable rate of the fertilizer in different areas of the farm, or in different farms, according to the nutrient array of that particular crop itself. What is the amount of nutrient present with a particular crop? That must be the amount of nutrient added into the crop is variable rate fertilizer. So different crops, different fertilizers, that can be practiced either through sensor based machines or map based machines, where we can map out the complete soil, understand the nutrients available, and then we can put in that type of the nutrient which is required for the soil. So that becomes variable rate fertilizer system. Rotational grazing above the cropland or grazing above the land in different area at different frequencies in different seasons of the year. That helps in reducing the overall soil compaction also, and reducing the overall stresses over the soil also. Crop diversification, intercropping, mixed cropping, crop rotation, etc. can be brought in over here, and adding more value to the crop cycle also, and adding more value to the nutrients available with the cropland can be taken up over here.
water management, management of the water resources, harvesting up of the water resources, creating new resources near the farmland, and then sustainable irrigation practices, etc. can be taken up over here. Then organic farming or zero budget natural farming can be one aspect of climate smart agriculture, realizing the climate smart agriculture itself. Organic farming help in bringing in more organic nutrients into the cropland itself, right? Bringing in, say, biofertilizers, biopesticides, reducing or minimizing the overall amount of chemical synthesizers or chemical substrates which are being added into the cropland, and bringing more organic nutrient into the cropland. Zero budget natural farming is a type of organic farming only, where we try to bring in the resources, organic resources from the farmland itself. So we harvest or we harbor livestock. The dung can be used as manure, the urine can be used as pesticide, and then these resources itself, and bringing in the resources coming from the farmland, the seeds coming from the farmland into the farmland itself, using those seeds, using that manure, using those pesticides, using the resources available in the farmland itself. The overall organic farming, if it is being practiced, that becomes zero budget natural farming. So the overall input in such type of the farming is far more lesser or comparatively zero. So it becomes zero budget natural farming also. That helps in resource conservation and resource utilization itself, both of the things, right? Then conservation agriculture, we have spoken about conserving the overall, creating a conservative method towards agriculture, covering the cropland with the cover crops, reducing tillage, reducing the overall emission, and managing the soil and water resources in the agriculture. That becomes conservative agriculture. Regenerative agriculture is a new method in farming, where we try to understand the basic conservative agriculture and we try to extend the conservative agriculture itself. Regenerative agriculture speaks about 5 major things. Number 1, reducing tillage. There should not be any tillage, again similar to what we speak about in conservative agriculture itself. There should be cover crops, there should be mulching, so that water loss can be lesser and organic nutrients in the soil can be higher. There could be livestock, integration with the cropland, and then we can increase, or rather we can reduce the emission through clean energy or various other modes. So that is meant by regenerative agriculture. So regenerative agriculture itself is a method which helps in reducing the emission and also enhancing the overall resource utilization itself, right? One type of regenerative agriculture is carbon farming, where we try to enhance the carbon sequestration from agriculture. It is a type of regenerative agriculture only. We cover the crop, we use the cover crops, so that all year around there are roots in the crop, so that our nutrient cycling is higher. The soil is covered, so the exposure of the soil is far more lesser, so the emission of the greenhouse gases from the soil can be far more lesser. Then organic material of the soil can be maintained with the soil itself. Then the cover crops, they help in sequestering up of the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, also captures carbon dioxide and stores carbon dioxide into the soil itself. Then we reduce the tillage, so that loss is not being pampered, or that loss is not being taken in, that loss of carbon dioxide or greenhouse gas is not being taken over here. And then raising the crops through mixed cropping or crop rotation or interbreeding or intercropping itself, so that diversification of the cropland is also being taken up. That becomes carbon farming, where we enhance the carbon sequestration of the farmland, reduces the overall emission from the farmland itself. That is again a practice which can be taken up over here. Then system of rice intensification and wheat intensification. The system of rice intensification and wheat intensification that helps in creating more stress tolerant seeds, water management, soil management, reducing the amount of water which is being used in the cropland, and then planting the seeds at the young cultivar, and then planting these seeds at a distance, so that there could be an aeration of the cropland itself, or using mechanical weeders, or using, we can say, cover crops also with the cropland, reducing the overall amount of water which is being utilized. That enhances the productivity of the cropland itself and reduces the overall budget or input of the cropland itself. That becomes system of rice intensification and wheat intensification. Again, resource management and utilization. Agroforestry is something where we can integrate the
farmland with the trees itself. Trees and farmland, in the farmland becomes agroforestry. It is of various types. Silvopasture, where the cropland can have the plant as well as livestock. Agro-silvopasture, where crops, livestock and the farmland, or we can say trees, can be integrated over here. That becomes agroforestry. So agroforestry also is one of the aspect of it, where it can help in realizing the climate smart agriculture. So all these different phenomena in agriculture, they all are being taken at a large to in the overall realization of the agriculture or the climate resilient agriculture, with various different new methods coming into place, or those which are more sustainable methods coming into place. They can be added over here, but right now the realization of climate smart agriculture is through these practices itself. So right now, if we look up to the soil management with the climate smart agriculture, maximizing continuous roots with rotation and relay crops and cover crops, maximizing the biodiversity in the agricultural field, minimizing the disturbance by reducing the tillage, and maximizing the soil cover by mulching and reduced tillage, etc., can be something which can help in the overall management of the soil with with climate smart agriculture. Management of water can be done by increasing the water use efficiency. We can use less of the water intensive crops, and we can utilize water in much better ways, right? Optimum drainage network, so that on the farm, with the farm itself, the water is being available, right? Less water intensive crops also, so that water consumption is far more lesser. Integrated river basin management, which will help in not only management of the river basin but also the watershed. What is watershed? The basin, drainage, cropland, and then the drainage of the cropland, that all becomes the watershed. Management of that complete channel is watershed management also. So integrated basin management would be management of the watershed. Then performance evaluation, evaluating the performance of different aspects or patterns of agriculture or methods of agriculture, and what are less water intensive, they can be practiced over here. Micro irrigation, where we can bring in sprinkler based irrigation, or we can also bring in drip irrigation. Micro irrigation can be of two types: drip irrigation, sprinkler irrigation, where we can send in the water directly to the roots of the crops, either through drip based pattern. These drips can be created through the subsurface or surfacial dips, where the channels or the pipes can be laid down over the surface, and they can be mulched, they can be covered using plastic sheets, so that water loss is lesser, and with lesser water input itself we can go for farming. Family drip, online drip, etc., also all drip irrigation. Then we can have sprinkler irrigation also, that can be practiced. Sprinkler irrigation can be where water management can be done through sprinklers. We can have center pivot. At the center there is a sprinkler, and that relays upon water to the cropland. Towable pivot, where we can tow down the sprinkler to the specified area. Rain gun, very small droplets can be dropped out either using the dome of the irrigation system or with the drones also. Impact sprinkler or pop-up sprinkler and linear move sprinkler, etc., are different types of the sprinkler which are being used in creating the micro irrigation methods also. Then the best irrigation practices through sprinkler also. Watershed management, water audit, understanding what is the amount of water consumption in what particular area with what particular crop type, and what is the overall output of the agriculture versus what is the amount of water resource utilized. So water intensiveness can be reduced over here with water audit. Benchmarking the basic audit or basic areas or the type of the crops which are less water intensive. Then appropriate maintenance of the resources, of the water resources also. Participatory irrigation management, where participatory management of different areas and sectors in managing the water and utilizing the water can be taken up over here. And legal and institutional framework can be created for the overall management of the water resources. Apart from this, harvesting the water, storing the water in micro catchment and the macro catchment areas can be done over here, where we can store water, the rain fed water, and utilize it for invariably various processes involved with agriculture or other processes also. Then conjunctive use of water. Conjunctive use of water is also something which can help in water management, where we can say conjunctive use is utilizing water from all different sources altogether, right? Not depending on one particular source at a time or completely, rather using all different sources of water. Like for example, if you take up Punjab and Haryana, they are more dependent over the underground water resources,
and because of this the underground water resource depletion is far more higher in these states. Had it been a conjunctive use of water, the conjunctive use of water would have been underground water resources plus the surfacial water resources plus all other encatchment water resources and rain-fed storage water resources that should have been taken up. And conjunctively these all water resources should have been utilized in agriculture or irrigation. Then the overall pressure on a singular resource would be far more lesser, and in fact utilization of these resources would be far more better. So in this way, if we understand, then the conjunctive use of water can also help in overall effect or impact over, or the pressure over agricultural, over the irrigation resources or the water resources, and water management can be practiced over here. So if we understand climate smart agriculture, then the climate smart agriculture is something which relates with all different fields, like it helps in maintaining animal husbandry with livestock coming into place, with integrative farming which is being spoken of. It works up with biotechnology where genome based approaches are being taken up, climate resilient seed varieties or genetically engineered varieties can be brought in over here. Agroforestry also comes in as one of the player for the climate smart agriculture. So agroforestry is also one aspect of it. Then precision agriculture, where ICT tools, drones, robots or other ICT management tools can be brought in farm, outside the farm also, for management of the practices in agriculture. Better breeding methods, with speed breeding, shuttle breeding methods, so that the impact of the climate change or global warming would be lesser in the young cultivars of the agricultural fields, right? Cover crops to maintain water loss or maintain the organic material and increasing the carbon sequestration, and then efficient irrigation practices. These are all integrated all together to realize the climate smart agriculture. That's why climate smart agriculture remains as something which is more holistic, more integrative phenomena, or more realistic response towards climate change also. With climate smart agriculture being adapted onto, there could be one more aspect of it, where climate smart agriculture helps in overall transformation of the rural areas also. So climate smart agriculture and the rural adaptation is also being spoken of, because majority of the rural areas, they are mostly dependent towards agricultural and agricultural phenomena. With the agriculture and the agricultural practices being more adaptive towards climate, then the related aspects can also be made more adaptive towards climate, and so the basic idea of climate smart villages is also being identified. Climate smart villages are those type of phenomena where the village and the village associated phenomena can be made more responsive towards climate change. It is not only about agriculture, but again the complete rural management through climate smart agriculture is something which can be taken up as climate smart villages. So even if this can be taken up as a question also, that rather than smart agriculture we require climate smart villages in India, yes, climate smart villages would be far more broader and extensive method of understanding or realizing the climate smart agriculture, wherein climate smart villages, the practices that can be adapted can be increased diversification of the cropland, so that more different varieties of the crops are being produced, more variety of the crops when they are being produced, variety of the incomes can be generated from the agricultural field itself, adapted varieties, and then crop and livestock systems can be brought in over here, they can be integrated. Biodiversity management can be done through these through smart villages. Then community management of the resources, not only a single farmland would be managing all these resources, all of them, they would be cumulatively managing the resources of water and soil, seed, fodder, grain, so that the overall input in managing the resources would also be far more lesser. Capacity building, or rather second other thing can be climate services can be brought in over here for the rural areas, for weather forecasting, agro advisories, and ICT based dissemination of the services can be made available over the mobile phones, or they can be made available over various different modes of telecommunication as well, so that forecasting can be made easy for the farmers, and the farmers are more realized with their approaches towards farming system also. Weather insurance, temperature and rainfall based disaster and their insurances can be brought in over here, and then a complete mitigation and carbon sequestration method can be developed in the villages with climate smart agriculture. Crop residues, tillage, irrigation, agroforestry, all of these, they can be brought in at one single place, and climate smart villages can also be created over here, which can also help in creating building a complete capacity for the villages by integrating farmers, self-help groups, scientists, industries and other, so that these villages may also become more responsive towards climate and more adaptive towards climate. And once villages are more adaptive towards climate, the livelihood understanding is much more higher, the agriculture is far more realized, is far more adapted, then the climate migration of the rural population would be far more lesser. Rather, villages would create more opportunities for the urban population to come in and settle, right? So with climate smart agriculture, of course, the basic realization of the reverse migration is also possible if it is being taken into consideration more exhaustively. So climate smart agriculture will help in better crop management, conserving the natural resources, will help in livestock production and adding variability into agriculture. Integrated farming systems can be brought in over here, and agro advisories can be brought in from self-help group or agricultural communities, which will help in adapting to weather aberration and extreme events. Household and village food security and sustainable development, and overall climate change mitigation can be brought in over here with climate resilient villages or climate smart villages. So rather than climate smart agriculture, we require climate smart villages, so that could be more extensive phenomena that can be generated. So climate smart villages, they would be further weather smart with forecast advisories, water smart with aquifer recharge, rainwater harvesting come into place, community management of water resources, on-farm water management, solar water pumps. There would be seed and breed smart with adaptive varieties, adaptive breeds and seed banks created in the banks itself. There would be carbon nutrient smart with agroforestry coming into place, minimum tillage, land use systems, livestock management, biofuels being produced over here, and institutional and market smart with cross-sectoral linkages, local institution coming into place and then helping it out with communities also. Then gender strategies of farm risk management can be driven in these villages, so that the climate smart villages would be far more smarter than even climate smart agriculture, and climate smart agriculture can only be realized with the smart villages. That can also be taken up over here, that can also be understood with this, right? So what all benefits the climate smart agriculture can produce, or the climate smart villages can also produce? There could be increased productivity from agriculture. When we say that the climate change would create an emphasis over the agriculture, 9 to 15% of agricultural productivity is bound to decrease by, say, in the next 2 or 3 decades. Adapting onto climate smart agriculture rather will help in increasing the productivity, and this can be increased by 18% from the conventional agriculture right now. So that can also be aspect of it. Increase net returns, because the overall inputs can be minimized with zero budget natural farming or organic farming or conservation agriculture taking into place. The cost or the investment into agriculture can be reduced and the outputs can be more, so that the net returns can be far more higher. Improvement in input use efficiency, of course, the inputs or the kind of resources which are being input in agriculture, they can be far more cost effective, and they can be far more efficient in their use also. Reduction in emission, we can create various methods through which the emission of the greenhouse gases from agriculture can be reduced. India is right now trying to go climate neutral or emission neutral by 2070, realizing climate smart agriculture at a faster rate and at a larger rate, and reducing the greenhouse gases can help in reducing the overall emission by 16%, the gross emission by 16%. So itself, agriculture is one of the major contributor, and if agriculture shift towards climate smart agriculture, the net emissions can be far more lesser, and this can be realized far more earlier also. So going climate neutral or going, say, carbon neutral by 2070, rather it can be realized far more earlier if we go for climate smart agriculture, right? Increase resilience towards climate change and increase gender and social inclusion, because with climate smart agriculture, of course, when smart villages are being brought in, communities are being brought in, the role for different genders can also be distributed, where in-farm management, resource management at the agriculture venue or with the cropland can be distributed, and females can be strengthened more over here. So gender intensive farming can be created over here, and rather in participation and inclusion of the females can be far more higher or far more realized in sustainable agriculture and climate smart agriculture. That can also be taken up over here with climate smart agriculture.
So climate smart agriculture is not alone as such it is beneficial, but it is also it would also be helpful in realizing the sustainable development. Climate smart agriculture vis-a-vis sustainable development, or climate smart agriculture is one of the major tool towards sustainable agriculture, if it is being asked in that way. Or how far do you think that climate smart agriculture is directed towards sustainable development? If it is being asked in this way, yes, climate smart agriculture is directed towards sustainable development. How? It helps in realizing the sustainable development goal. The poverty reduction can be far more higher, because productivity with the agricultural and diversity with the agricultural produce can be is far more higher. So the net returns are also far more higher. Poverty can reduce in the rural itself, right? And with rural, of course, the problem is far more higher. The hunger can be reduced because productivity from agriculture can be reduced, and help in realizing the second sustainable development goal, that is no hunger. And then it also helps in realizing the gender equality, because the role of females would be far more higher in the climate smart agriculture in managing the in-farm resources. So the gender equality would be far more higher. Then the decent work and economic growth would be far more higher for rural population, specifically the population which is more feared upon with migration right now. They will have more opportunities at their local farmlands, and also more utilization of their local resources would be far more higher. So the economic output would be far more higher. Then the reduced inequalities in distribution of the resources, utilization of the resources. When your farming becomes zero budget itself, then the resource inequality becomes null down itself with the agriculture, because the resource inequality prevails only when you have much amount of the input to be put for the agricultural resources. If the cost of agricultural resource input is far more higher, then the inequalities would be far more higher, because those which would be able to afford those costs, they would be in a better situation. Those which will not be able to afford that cost, they would be in a far more bad condition, or far more stringent condition. So if we understand this particular thing, with farming input shifting into place, resource management shifting into place, resource utilization shifting into place, of course the inequalities in farming and agriculture would be far more lesser. So the reduced inequalities, responsible consumption and production can be taken up over here, because we are going for resource management, resource utilization. So resource wastage would be far more lesser over here. Reutilization and then management is something which will help in reducing the overall resource wastage. So consumption would be far more sustainable over here. Then climate action, of course, with climate smart agriculture coming into place, the adaptability towards climate we are increasing. So climate action, it is not only that the green energy which would be taken up, rather it is a far more broader aspect of climate adaptation. Life on land would be easier. Life on water would also be easier, in fact, because pollution from agriculture, if runoff can be reduced, then of course large scale pollution of the water bodies can also be reduced. Peace and justice and strong institutions, of course, can be brought in over here. So all these sustainable development goals, they can be realized. At least 10 out of 17 sustainable development goals can be realized with climate smart agriculture coming into place, or climate smart villages coming into place, and this will help in realizing far more better aspects of adaptability towards climate change. If we look up to what actually India is doing right now towards climate smart agriculture, India has taken up various aspects, and the first and foremost aspect towards realizing climate smart agriculture was in 2011, when National Initiative towards Climate Resilient Agriculture, National Initiative towards Climate Resilient Agriculture, or we can say it can be climate smart agriculture, because resilient and smart agriculture is something which has been taken up synonymous, right? So National Initiative on Climate Resilient Agriculture helps in generating more and more innovation towards climate preparedness and climate adaptiveness. So that is one aspect of that helps in realizing the climate smart agriculture in India. Then National Adaptation Fund for Climate Change, which was realized in 2015, towards generating more and more fund for the adaptability towards climate change, and changing adaptability for agriculture is also being funded with this National Adaptation Fund for Climate Change. Then under the Pradhan Mantri Krishi Yojana, the soil health card has been taken up over here, Rashtriya Krishi Yojana, which has now become the Rashtriya Krishi Yojana. Under the Rashtriya Krishi Yojana, the soil health card has been taken up. Earlier it was Pradhan Mantri Krishi Yojana, Krishi Vikas Yojana rather. that has been taken up. So under these two, the soil health card that helps in identifying the state of the soil in the different agricultural cropland, the type of nutrient required, the different subsidies can be provided based on that. So soil health cards. Climate smart village initiatives have been taken up at a pilot scale in Rajasthan, in Andhra Pradesh, in Tamil Nadu, to realize that if climate smart agriculture is to be brought in, how at the community level with the participation of the community, how climate smart agriculture can be realized. So climate smart villages and their initiatives. Organic farming under Paramparagat Krishi Vikas Yojana has been taken up, and then from Paramparagat Krishi Vikas Yojana, this has also been shifted towards Rashtriya Krishi Vikas Yojana, where the overall aspect of natural farming has been improvised, with National Mission on Natural Farming coming into place, with organic farming missions also coming into place in 2000 and 2021, where National Mission on Natural Farming was realized, right? Then neem coated urea, where organic fertilizers etc., they have also been brought in over here. Then PM Kusum solar pump sets have also been brought in, that helps in reducing the overall emission from the diesel gen sets of the cropland and help in realizing the irrigation through solar pumps. Climate resilient seed varieties, approximately 94 such varieties have been spoken of in this year's budget also, that can help in realizing the increased potential of productivity as such, right? Biotech Kisan initiative that helps in understanding the better varieties of the livestock and livestock rearing also. So that helps with livestock mission also, that helps in bringing in more and more different varieties of the livestock in the cropland and increasing the integration of cropland with the livestock. Then the Gramin Krishi Mausam Seva, that helps in understanding the weather forecasting, and that also helps in realizing the early warning towards any type of these stresses towards agricultural cropland. National Water Mission has been realized with National Action Plan for Climate Change since 2010 and helps in understanding and managing the cropland resources. With this, Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana, where the watershed management, drought prone area management, flood prone area management has been taken up under Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana. On farm water resource management, off farm water resource management, water harvesting, all have been taken up with this. With Pradhan Mantri Krishi Yojana, Krishi Sinchai Yojana, Atal Bhujal Yojana, or even other Water Shakti mission, also they have been taken up, Mission Water Shakti, that helps in understanding and realizing or reducing the overall problems of water resource management in the villages or in the rural areas. Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana helps in understanding it for agriculture and watershed management. So overall these three, they help in management of the water resources also. So India has taken up a large scale step towards identifying or managing the climate smart agriculture in India. But with all these different phenomena or all these mechanisms they have been taken up, there is still a vacuum towards having a large scale policy towards climate smart agriculture realization, or national policy for climate smart agriculture or national policy for climate resilient agriculture is still missing. The initiatives, they are more at pilot level. The initiatives are far more localized, or they are far more restricted to a particular state. They have not been realized so fast, or the realization is comparatively slower right now. Although the practices for climate smart agriculture, they have been taken up, different practices, but altogether holistic impact of it has not been identified. It is still it will require some amount of the time to actually identify and realize what exactly is the basic potential for the climate smart agriculture. So still a vacuum of a large scale policy is there, or a legal framework is there. Then too, we are working towards climate smart agriculture, and that is one aspect of it, right? NABARD has also recently taken up a climate strategy, where it is trying to create a more market based approach, where accelerating green lending across sectors and playing a broader market making role for the green sectors, or we can say green outputs, is something which has been taken up by NABARD. It has taken up in 2024, and that helps in overall green transformation. So if we say green transformation, then with identification of various factors of climate smart agriculture itself, the green identification or green transformation is one aspect of climate smart agriculture itself. So in realizing the climate smart agriculture, the climate finance for climate smart agriculture, adaptive agriculture, and development of resilient rural livelihood,
and market adaptive agriculture tools can be something that can help in realizing climate smart agriculture with this strategy also. This is a long term strategy, and this will help in creating a climate smart agriculture market push as well, because India has also taken up a Indian green credit program or green credit scheme. In the green credit scheme, we are trying to identify different sectors where carbon intensive phenomena or carbon sequestering phenomena can be identified, and they can be funded through different carbon credits or domestic carbon credits which can be generated through green credit program. In the same way, with NABARD strategy, agricultural program is being brought in over here with giving credit towards increasing the overall benefits of climate smart agriculture or adapting onto climate smart agriculture. Of course, that will help in bringing in more influx of money towards these policy, these different phenomena, and people would be, or farmers would be far more inclined towards such type of the phenomena. So NABARD's strategy towards the climate smart or the climate strategy is something which can be taken up as one step towards, or one step far closer towards realizing climate smart agriculture in India, right? Apart from this, at the international level, climate smart agriculture has also been spoken of, where CGIAR research program on climate smart climate change, agriculture and food security, CCAF, speaks about the overall food security, poverty and climate change, and then adapting onto climate smart agriculture. Global Alliance for Climate Smart Agriculture has also been identified, which brings together the government, civil society, farmers and research institutions and private bodies all together in realizing the investment towards climate smart agriculture. And climate smart agriculture youth network is also being created to bring in more young people to identify climate smart agricultural practices and realizing the climate smart practices. Also at the international level, the European Union Green Deal much recently in 2022, which was realized in further, which has been taken up by European Union to become climate neutral by 2050, has taken up various steps towards realizing different sectors like climate, energy, industry, environment, oceans, agriculture, transport and finance and regional development. Among this, the agriculture through climate smart agriculture or organic farming action plan or farm to fork strategy or climate smart agriculture realization has been taken up by the European Union also. So at a larger scale, European Union is also working towards developing a strategy for climate smart agriculture, right? With initiatives taken up for climate smart agriculture, AIM for climate has also taken up, which is Agricultural Innovation Mission for Climate under the joint initiative of UAE and United States, which is working to enable solutions for agriculture and climate smart agriculture. It was launched in 2021 under the COP 2026 of Glasgow, and it is a strategy which is being taken up to understand for 2021 and 25. If this comes into place, then this can be expanded. India later joined this AIM in 2022, and now it is various other organizations apart from various other countries. India is also party to this, and they are trying to bring in more innovation towards climate smart agriculture or realizing climate smart agriculture itself, right? So that is also being brought in over here at the international level. But with all these things coming into place, we have spoken about various different advantages of climate smart agriculture, tools, methods which are being utilized in climate smart agriculture. CSA still have greater challenges right now. If we understand the climate smart agriculture and its basic challenges, then climate smart agriculture has 4 major challenges. The first and foremost challenge with climate smart agriculture is still it is labor intensive. It requires much amount of the labor, right? Manual labor in fact, right? Be it be organic farming, be it be zero budget natural farming, or no plowing, or cover crops, or all these different phenomena that we have spoken about, or even adaptive agriculture, or even you speak about carbon farming. These are all labor intensive cropping patterns, and with the conventional methods of cropping and mechanization coming into place, the labor intensive cropping systems they have been reduced in the cropland. So unless
the climate smart agriculture is very well integrated with precision agriculture, where tools or mechanization can be brought in. Of course, then if the mechanization comes into, the emission would be far more higher. So we have to create alternative energy methods also, and then mechanization. Unless this mechanization, alternative energy integration, precision agriculture integration is being brought at a large scale, transition from the conventional agriculture towards climate smart agriculture would be something which would be far-fetched dream. This is one basic challenge with climate smart agriculture. The second and foremost aspect of climate smart agriculture, and it's lacking, it would require a large scale funding to transit from conventional agriculture into a new type of agriculture, because as there are more opportunities, so there are more risk associated as well. We speak about biofertilizer, or we speak about biopesticide, taking as an example itself. It is not so that biopesticide and biofertilizers are completely an alternative towards chemical fertilizers and chemical pesticides. Although they are more sustainable, although they are more utilizable, but then too they cannot generate an emergency response. So when there is no emergency response which can be generated from say the traditional, from say the new climate smart agriculture tools and techniques, we have to invest a large amount of money over here to understanding more new practices which can be more emergency responsive. Right? If climate smart agriculture becomes more emergency responsive, it would be more acceptable also, because that is the basic advantage of conventional agriculture, and that is one of the basic disadvantage of climate smart agriculture also. The emergency responses and then the adaptive funding for the climate smart agriculture. In realizing the climate smart agriculture, we require a large scale fund. Already 1.5% of the GDP, 1.5 to 2% of the GDP is expected for realizing the adaptability for climate change. Then this again would be far more problematic. And also the social and local acceptability of climate smart agriculture is something which would also be a challenge, and realizing the climate smart agriculture in India. So at a larger scale, climate smart agriculture can have variable benefits which can be generated and advantages that can be generated. We can simply look up to a particular question that evaluate the utility of climate smart agriculture in managing the ecosystem for sustainable livelihood, comment on the government initiatives to achieve climate smart agriculture in India. This can be taken up as a question for your practice. So understand this particular phenomena, climate smart agriculture. Write down this question and help yourself or add in value to your preparation towards main using this particular video. I hope this particular video was informative, was something that helps in realizing the basic idea of the basic topic which is being discussed. We'll continue to come up with these different topics for mains preparation through our RWR video weeks. Right? Thank you very much for your patience.